everybody, to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I am so honored to be joined by one of my favorite guests, the Executive Director of the Central Penn College Education Foundation, Sandy Box. Sandy, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Paul. It's always a pleasure. I look forward to this at least twice a year. Sometimes if you throw me in for a third time.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Of course, we're going to talk all about everything going on in the foundation, but mainly the foundation scholarship application that is open now.
Right.
Also being joined by Nightly News reporter Nick Hogan. Nick, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, it's good to be back again. It's been a little bit since I've been here.
Yeah, Nick is one of our freshman, almost sophomore students who is actually stepping into a bit of a promotion, and he is going to fill the shoes of Leslie Heimbaugh and Dylan Bowman as our CPC Film Series correspondent, and that will be starting in the spring. So I'm going to be working with him during our winter edition of the film series when Dylan is going to be presenting, and definitely looking forward to continued success with the Nightly News. Already had an article published with the club. It's done some really awesome things. So Nick, it's awesome to have you here, and look forward to many more.
Awesome to be here.
All right, well, so Sandy, the big thing that we want to talk about today, the Central Penn College Education Foundation Scholarship Application.
Yes.
This is something that we have you on each and every term, or that the application is available,
right,
so we can kind of go over some tips for success for how to approach the foundation scholarship.
Right.
So to start off, the foundation scholarship can be found at foundation.centralpenn.edu and does close on February 24th. So that's about 10 days from when this podcast is released. So please, if you have not already, please make your way over to the site. But we're going to talk much more about that and how you're going to be successful. And then we'll take a look at what the Stabler Foundation is, and we'll take a look at the question, maybe give you a few tips, a few ideas for how to be successful on that.
Sounds perfect.
All right, so this is something that you do twice a year. So give us a little bit of background about the foundation scholarship itself, maybe how many annually receive a scholarship, how much money is given out to our students, etc.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Okay, so first off, the Education Foundation was started in 2004, established in 2004 to provide scholarship assistance to our students to help them succeed and graduate from college. Every year we do 2 terms. We do one in the winter term and one in the summer term, and then the funds are dispersed in spring and fall respectively. So what we try to do is we try to come up with questions that you can't get wrong. I tell people that all the time. You can't get it wrong. It's an essay about you, so nobody knows you like you. The only way you can get it wrong is if you don't answer the question that's posed to you. So, we started off in 2005 issuing the first scholarship, and since then we have awarded more than 4,000 scholarships.
Wow.
Yes. It's huge. It really is. And this term, we're earmarked to disperse about $135,000 to $150,000 in scholarship assistance. So I tell people all the time, it's the easiest money that you're ever going to apply for, because it's an essay about you. You can't get it wrong. It takes you about a half an hour at the most, and you have the potential to receive a scholarship valued anywhere between $500 and $2,000. I don't know what job you're planning to get when you graduate from college, but if you can get a job making $500 a half an hour, you better jump on it right now.
A little history lesson here.
Yeah.
Just we'll talk about this in a little bit. The Golf Open, which is the largest fundraiser that you do each and every year, is going to be celebrating its 52nd anniversary on August 11th.
Yes.
But the foundation only started in 2004?
Yes. It was originally started and hosted by the Alumni Association. By the college. So for many years, it was like I said, hosted by the Alumni Association, and they handled it. And then when the foundation was created, it was determined that it would switch from the Alumni Association over to the Education Foundation.
Really interesting.
Yes.
You learn something new every day.
You do.
And I've been involved with the foundation for almost 10 years.
Right.
And I didn't even know that. So like
See?
when you're starting to line the math up, I just wanted to follow up. But we
Yeah.
will talk more about the
Sure.
golf tournament here in a little bit.
Yeah.
So the foundation scholarship is open to every student here at Central Penn College, even students who maybe, for example, in the summer are taking the summer off but planning to come back in fall. It's eligible for them as well. Even people on schedule gap that are planning on coming back in the spring can also fill this out.
Right. And even students that are just new this term, so they're new for the winter term, they may not have a GPA. And one of the requirements is when you go in to fill out the essay, it says, fill out your GPA. Well, you have an idea as to what it is, but you know that don't put anything under 2 because it will kick you out.
Yeah.
So, you put in a 2.0 as your GPA. If it's higher than that, it's fine, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to verify it anyway. But what happens is that allows you to apply. It allows you to have your scholarship evaluated by the reviewers and be put into the mix. Otherwise, if we waited for you to have a GPA, you wouldn't be able to apply then until the summer. So you would miss out on 2 terms that you could possibly receive financial aid. So we changed that a couple years ago to make it easier, to make it a little bit hopefully to be able to reach more students. So that's one of the things that we do. So I tell you, even if you have no GPA, even if this is your first term, even if you're taking off next term, complete the application. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, the application is submitted. It's a blind submission. So the evaluators cannot see your name. All they see is the major that you're in, your GPA. They'll see some of the financial information, your home, your family size. That's what they see when they look at the scholarship. And it is randomly sent to 5 different evaluators. So 5 people get the opportunity to review your scholarship, and then those scores are put together, and we get an average score for that. So just to give you that kind of background, that each application is reviewed by 5 reviewers, and then when we do the scholarship selection, there are 10 people on the selection committee, and we use the scores that were provided by the reviewers, and then we look at your GPAs again, and we look at your financial need, and are you coming back for the term? Are you finishing up? Is this your last term? We look at a lot of those things, but the 10 people on the selection committee represent various departments and various majors throughout the campus. So we really do try and make sure that we get a pretty good broad feedback of our students and input from financial aid, from student housing, from the professors or deans that are involved. So it really is a thorough process, I think.
And of course, I'm part of the selection
Yes.
committee, which I love. It's always it's so unbelievable what you're able to do with these meetings, because you're essentially in an hour or so giving away $150,000,
Right.
and that can have some really serious positive ramifications for these students who are winning these scholarships.
Oh.
So, to your point, Sandy, it is people from all across the campus, right?
Correct.
It is people from all different departments. Not only on the faculty side, but also on the staff side as well.
Right.
So who are these evaluators?
Who are the evaluators? Okay, so some of them are alum. Some of them are employees here. Truth be told, a lot of them are board members from both the college side and the foundation side. And some of them are just donors who have established funds previously, and they just want to be part of it. So it's a wide range. I added 6 new evaluators this term. So we're up to, I think there's like 40 evaluators
wow.
that they get dispersed out to, so that that they're reading. We don't want to overwhelm them because these are all volunteers. Nobody gets paid for anything, right?
Right.
So it's all volunteer. So we don't want to give them 50 scholarship applications to review. We like to keep it 20 to 40. That's what we like. And like I said, it is unusual when I've found over the years of doing this, because I've been doing scholarship reviews and scholarship disbursements for over 20 years. And the funny thing is that everybody looks at the scholarship application differently. You may have someone who is very much in tune to the grammar and the punctuation. But then you may have another person who gives more weight to where the student lives or how many people are in the student's family. And then you might have other people who give a lot of just to the answer to the essay itself. the funny thing is that no matter what perspective you have when you go in to review that, it's so unusual that the scores are all pretty close to one another. So it's strange because people say, "Well, how do I do this?" It's a gut check.
Yeah.
It really is. It's what you find, when you read it. Did they answer the question? Was it an easy read? The other thing is that we take into consideration that some of our students, English is their second language.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
you can't be, well, they didn't do this or they didn't. Well, you have to take that into consideration.
100%.
So I think it's very good. And if I look at a student's score, and I think, boy, that seems strange because that student has a GPA of this, but their score was this. Sometimes I can go in to look to see whether or not someone
Skewed.
Yes, someone skewed the average by putting in a very bad grade, a very bad number, and again, you don't know why they would have done that. But if that skews the whole score of that student, then I have to go in and make a few little adjustments. I don't have to do that often, but I do. If somebody brings it to my attention, I will definitely review that.
I do have a question just to clarify for people that don't know much about this, which is why they're listening to this.
Yes.
Because this is a scholarship, that means it's not paid back, right? It's just free money given to you, so people don't have to worry about like loan payments or anything like that.
Very good. Very good question.
Yeah.
Very good. As a matter of fact, I just did a presentation at a class a couple weeks ago, and I asked the question, do you know the difference between a loan, a scholarship, and a grant? And a lot of people in the class do not. And so I went through the, loan you have to pay back. Grant is awarded to you usually as you're coming in, not the scholarship is something you have to apply for. We have 64 different scholarships in the foundation.
That was something I told my class yesterday that they were just very surprised by
Right.
because I had people asking me about individual scholarships. And I said, well, I got to be honest with you. I don't know anything about that one specific scholarship.
Yeah.
What I can tell you is that Sandy always says that this application is an application for all of these scholarships that you might be eligible for.
There
Right.
really is a scholarship for everything.
Yeah, it is. Now, I will say that, like I said, we do this one application twice a year, and that is for, it used to be for all of them. I'm going to say right now it's for the majority of scholarships that we have because we've been fortunate enough in the last year or so to obtain a few more scholarships that are just, they don't want them in that process. They want a specific application.
Got it.
Yeah.
Some of them are for veterans, so that's a specific application that they have to fill out. We just came up with met with the company and developed an agreement for a special scholarship that they have to do an application for, but it is for $1,000 per term.
That's unbelievable.
That's amazing. That's
$1,000 per term, as long as you continue to meet the criteria that is outlined. And when I say $1,000 per term, $1,000 per term while you're here.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're talking a lot of potential. We have a couple other ones that have a specific scholarship application that has to be filled out, and that they don't fall in this area. But usually what I do with those is I identify the students, and I specifically send an email to those students with the application
Right.
saying, you've been identified.
So I want to go back to the earlier comment that you made about your trip into a class recently.
Yes.
One of the things that I have done used to be in my Com 101 class, but I haven't had the opportunity to teach that quite as much lately. So I did it in my public relations class yesterday, and is about, I led with, I'm going to save you 10 grand.
Right.
By just you listening
Yeah.
to the next half hour, 45 minutes. And then I go into loans and scholarships and grants and even simple things like saving money on textbooks.
Right.
So I gave them a lot of that. What's really interesting that I have found from doing this over the past 10 years of being here is that the average person in college doesn't understand much about student loans. And I made this comment to Nick, and he's in that class,
Yeah.
but not to him specifically, to the class, that when you think about why so many people use loans, it's because it's the easiest way.
Right.
Yep.
You fill out a FAFSA, you sign on the dotted line, your school is paid for.
Right.
You're kicking it down the road and messing over future you.
Right.
and not thinking about present you.
Definitely, yeah.
And so I wanted to go back to that. Nick, in our conversations in class, what were some of the things that I shared with you that you either didn't know or were really surprising in our discussion about scholarships and loans yesterday?
The one thing I noticed, like I kind of already knew this to begin with, but you definitely put it more into perspective, saying how when you do loans, you're kind of obviously they're definitely great if you really need them, but they should be more of a last resort type of thing because like you said earlier, it's money that you're getting, but you're going to have to pay it back. And that's why a lot of people never end up finishing college because they get swamped with student loan debt. And I think because of that, that could be a huge demotivator. And I think that's the great thing about this is that it's literally free money that they want to give you to help you succeed in college. And I think that's like the best reward you could ask for.
And even just to reduce the burden of you having to take loans.
Yeah.
And we also started talking about how traditional age college students get a cap of financial aid, which means if they need additional money, then they have to figure out ways to bridge that gap between what that cap is and what they actually need. And this is another huge thing. I mean, you get an extra $1,000, that's $1,000 you don't again have to take a
adds
loan or
up.
find cash.
Yeah.
What's up?
In the class, I did a presentation on, I had just watched a documentary. Mm-hmm. This young man wanted to go to a big name school and realized how much it was going to cost him to go to this big name school and decided that instead he received a scholarship and a financial aid package from a local school, and it allowed him to reduce his debt from what it was going to be by just, he's still going to get the same education because I'm a firm believer that education is what you put into it. You get out of it what you put in.
100%.
Right. Yeah. If you put in 100%, you're getting 100% plus back. And if you only give it half, well, that's about all you're going to get back. But anyway, so listen, I watched this documentary, and this young gentleman, and I say young gentleman because he was 18. He graduated from high school and realized what it was that he wanted to do, but his family did not have the financial means to be able to do that. He set up on a weekly basis 2 hours where he went in online, did research on scholarships nationwide, scholarships that are available. He made it as though it was his class. So he went to this class once a week for 2 to 3 hours, would sit, do the research, fill out the applications. He graduated 4 years later owing nothing.
That's unbelievable. I love to
Wow,
hear those types of
yeah.
things.
Owed nothing because he put in the time and put in the effort to fill out the applications. The Education Foundation awards about $300,000 annually. So that's a nice bit of money. However, we are just one
Absolutely.
of many sources.
Yeah.
And there are so many scholarships that are out there that are left on the table because students don't apply. They don't take the time. And for lack of it, this is free money. Don't pay it back. Nobody's going to say to you, oh, well, don't forget you have to make that student loan payment, That's not going to happen. But you have to put in the energy. Just like you do here. Mm-hmm. It's a half an hour, it's an hour, but you have to put in the time, you have to put in the energy. You have to give it some thought as to how you're going to answer, what you're going to say, what's the story you want to tell. Because, again, what you have to remember, these evaluators don't see you. They don't know you.
This is
Yeah.
all they get from you
This
is
is-
what you write on this application.
That's why you got to give it your all, right?
You've got to tell your story. I mean, that's what this is all about. This is fundraising, and that's what you're doing. You're fundraising. You are raising funds for your education. So the only way that you can get that is to tell your story. You have to make sure that evaluator, they go, that was really a
Exactly.
good
Gotta sell
answer
'em.
to that aspect. That was great. That's worth an 8. That's worth a 9. That's worth a 10. That's what you have to do. So it's a little bit of energy, a little bit of time, well worth it.
Well said.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, before we get out of here, there's just 2 quick things that I want to talk about, and then we will. I'll run down everything. So we're sitting here talking about not having to pay this money back. That scholarship is free money, but students might get a little confused if they come to the application and see the Donald B. and Dorothy L. Stabler Foundation. I always make it a point, Sandy, to point out that, number one, it is always in a student's best interest to click the box.
Correct.
That is where a large portion, a very large portion
Mm-hmm.
of these funds come from is the Stabler Foundation. If you do not check that box, you're not eligible for the bigger awards. Now, what it says is that you're pledging to contribute monies to the Stabler Fund of the Central Penn College Education Foundation in the amount at least equal to the amount that they received. So if somebody reads that, they might be like, I actually had a student that emailed me and said, well, I'm not really sure about this. Like, is this a loan? No. And I just want to be clear that this is a debt of conscience, not a legal obligation.
Right.
That is a moral obligation to make it possible for others to receive these future scholarships in the future.
Right.
So again, I know that pledge might be a little misleading.
Right.
But it's not as if you're going to keep a file of everybody. Hey, Nick got $500 and he's on the clock for
Right.
paying that back.
Right.
And that's just not what it is.
No, that's not what it is. You're right. It's a moral obligation. And the reason that they did that, the reason that Stablers put that in, it's not just this college. It's any college that they give funds to. That's an obligation that they wanted people to make a moral commitment that when you have the ability to start paying back, that you would think of how you felt when you got that scholarship and want to pay it forward. And so one of the things that I have to do as part of this, that's your obligation. Your obligation is to click that box. My obligation is to remind you that you clicked the box. So annually, I send out a little reminder saying, hey, you received the Donald B. and Dorothy L. Stabler Scholarship when you were at Central Penn College. You remember how it felt when you got that award. But I'm not asking you for $500. I'm not asking you for $1,000. I'm asking you to consider starting the repayment, whether that's $20 a year, $25 a year, your graduation year. It doesn't matter. It's just really for me to be able to show the Stabler Foundation that our students get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They get that this is a generous donor who has provided an opportunity for our students. And it's just to show that our students get it.
And this also has to be how this fund still continues to exist because of this too. I mean, so not only did the Stablers establish this, but because of integrating this into these scholarships, that's probably helping keep it viable.
Right, exactly. It keeps it moving.
It's definitely good to let them know where it's coming
Right.
from.
The only other thing I will say, I do require one thing, and it is not. It's not up for negotiation. If you receive a scholarship from the Education Foundation, you must submit a thank you card.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as we finish up here, Nick, I wanted to give you one final opportunity. We talked about this a lot in class yesterday, but this is going to be your first time going through this process. So I want you to try to give some students out there listening some tips on how you're going to approach this and how you feel that you're going to be successful.
I think the best way to be successful and the way that I'm definitely going to do it is definitely check back as much as possible because you never know when new opportunities will show up and you never know if there's something you missed because there's so many scholarship opportunities that you have. Not just including the Education Foundation, but I was talking in general for money in general,
How about with this essay specifically?
Yeah, with this essay specifically, definitely keep in mind that they don't know you, like you said earlier, because you have to sell them on you and you have to let them visualize who you are. And it's really hard to be persuasive. Lord knows in high school I had awful time writing persuasive essays. But if it's about yourself, you just got to write from the heart, and you could do more, way more than 30 minutes of your time. I mean, obviously, it only should take like 30 minutes, but if you're really passionate and you really want this scholarship, you can fill out pages and pages about yourself.
Right.
Yeah, and Nick, I appreciate you saying that. And to me, that's the most important thing is that students, this is the way that you're communicating
Right.
for this opportunity. So, well, Sandy, I really appreciate it. Of course, I will just read off the question really quickly. Explain how you have helped your family or made your community a better place to live. Please provide specific examples. Yesterday in class, one of the things I was just saying is I encourage people to do pre-writing. Think about it for a day
Right.
or two before you sit down and actually try to write it, and I think it'll flow much easier. I love this question.
Yeah.
This was the one I picked. I am so involved with community service here through
Right.
CPC Gives Back. Not only that, but working with the foundation. So it's something I'm really passionate about. So I hope that this podcast has helped not only give you a little context about the foundation, but also kind of walked you through some ways that you can be successful. So
Absolutely.
Before we leave, I want to put out there that the best golf tournament you possibly can
Absolutely.
go to is the 52nd Annual Central Penn College Education Foundation Golf Outing that will be on Friday, August 11th at Rich Valley Golf. I will say that last year you sold out. They wouldn't even let you bring in the last couple of teams.
No.
So if this is something that you want to be a part of this year, please do it early. Sandy, when can they start signing up for this event?
I'm hoping that they'll be able to start signing up by April Fool's Day.
April 1st.
There you go.
Mark it on your calendar, April
Yes.
1st, to sign up for the Central Penn College Education Foundation Golf Tournament. Always an amazing time, even if you're a horrible golfer
That's
like
right.
me.
Don't be a fool. Sign up.
All right. Well, hey, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. But Sandy, gosh, it's always such a pleasure to have you.
I love it. I love it. I look forward to it twice a year.
Well, we will. Maybe I need to have you back every
Maybe
single
you
time.
do.
But if nothing else, we'll definitely have you back in the summer to talk more about the next round of scholarship application. But
Right.
also the golf tournament.
That's it. That's it. Absolutely.
Nick, thank you very much for joining us. Certainly looking forward to having you on future podcasts. You're a natural.
I appreciate it. It feels much more comfortable than my first time. So definitely.
Well, that's the thing. Every time you do it, it gets a little bit easier. And then
Yep.
sooner or later, you're like Sandy, a professional.
Practice makes perfect.
All right. Well, hey, that's going to do it on this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. Special thanks to Nightly News reporter Nick Hogan. Thanks
Thank
for being
you.
here, Nick.
Yep.
And the executive director of the Central Penn College Education Foundation, Sandy Box. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I wouldn't miss it for the world.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. For Nick Hogan, Sandy Box, this is Professor Paul Miller, and I'll see you again next time on the Nightly News Podcast.
Hey, this is Brian. Thanks for listening. Thank you for being also a fan of the Nightly News Media Club here at Central Penn College.
Welcome, everybody, to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I am so honored to be joined by Megan Peterson. Megan, I'm going to let you talk a little bit more about your title here, since as of the first of the year, you've taken on some additional responsibilities. So tell us what your title is and maybe how some of these things have changed from even last term.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure.
So my current title is the Associate Vice President of Equity and Student Success. Very exciting.
Vice President, that's amazing. Congratulations to you. I cut off the
Associate
end
Vice
of it.
President.
one more time. The Executive Vice President, or excuse me.
So my current title is the Associate Vice President of Equity and Student Success. And yeah, there's been a lot of changes in student services since the end of last term. So in my role currently, I still work with students in Title IX. I still oversee student rights and responsibilities, which has to do with our student conduct process, as well as grievances and multicultural programming, such as the programming calendar that you'll see out for Black History Month. And then I oversee our new team of 3 student success coaches. So our student success coaches are folks that will be helping students really navigate their college experience from the time they enroll to the time they graduate outside of academic advising. So academic advising is now being handled by our faculty. But our student success coaches also each have an area of focus that they'll be really working on. So Megan Kaiser has stepped into the role of success coach, who will also be working with our athletes and our veteran students. We have Elijah Tinson, who just started a couple days ago. He will also be serving as our Director of First Year Experience and the PACT program. And then Judy Karras is starting in 2 weeks, and she will be our new Director of Accessibility Services.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. Well, we're also being joined here by the newly minted Nightly News Vice President, Sarah Whitmire. Sarah, thank you so much for being here, and welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So one of the things that we hope to talk about is really kind of unpacking a lot of what you just talked about, because, I mean, we could probably have a podcast just on each of the individual facets of your job. I think the first question, and probably most important, is how do you ever get anything done with all the different things that you have to do? I mean, to me, this seems like you're probably being pulled in a lot of different directions. So talk to me about how a normal day goes for you in terms of how you get your initiatives completed.
A normal day? What's that? I say that the way that I get things done is with a lot of caffeine and a lot of time management skills. So every day I take some time to block out my calendar for the day. I like to physically write out in my planner everything that I need to do and my top 3 priorities for the day. So sometimes my days get crazy, get pulled in different directions. Might have students pop into my office and I really want to make be able to make myself available for that. So I try every day to just set 3 top priorities of things I absolutely must get done. And of course, I have a list of other things I'd love to get done, but kind of keeping it really narrow and focused keeps me on track with the most important things.
Gosh, Sarah, I mean, just that sounds like a great way to live. Maybe I need to start doing that.
Yeah, it can be crazy.
So, well, okay, so let's start unpacking some of this stuff. So this is common news to everybody at this point, but the school at the end of 2022 did do some restructuring in terms of a few different areas, from counseling services to our advising center, and that some of these things kind of changed. So let's start there with really the student-facing aspects of this restructure. So first of all, we went away from having a counseling center on campus and went to a model where we are partnering with a nationwide organization through Mazziti and Sullivan, who they came, I believe, a couple of weeks ago and gave us a presentation about not only this transfer of, I'm trying to think of a better way to say this, not only this shift to how we're using our counseling services, but also what their services actually are for both our students and faculty and staff. So talk a little bit about how this shift has changed things for students seeking mental health assistance.
Sure. So it's certainly a big change for students who are used to being able to go to our on-campus counseling center. But students are still able to receive counseling either in person or virtual, depending on their preference, through our partnership with MNS EAP. So MNS has a really large network of providers. So students can go to their kind of intake referral form that we have linked in our website and on the Student Services SharePoint page. There's also QR codes around campus. Students can fill out some basic information about the type of counseling that they're seeking. That form does ask students for their insurance information, but we do not bill insurance. That's just so that if a student wants to continue above the number of sessions covered by the college, that they're getting paired with a counselor that's within their network to make that transition easier. From there, MNS will compile a list of providers that they think would be a good match, and students really have some choice from there of who they want to start working with. All of our students are entitled to up to 5 free sessions every term.
That's incredible.
And because we have access to such a wide network, so our online students, maybe students who aren't local, can still get paired with a counselor that's local to them through this network of providers that we have.
You know, I've shared this in the past, but there have been times in my PhD program where I felt really overwhelmed and that my mental health was not where it was, and counseling was extremely beneficial for me. I do know that even to this day, it's still sort of a stigma for people to talk about. That's why I've tried to make it a priority for me to share my own experiences with my classes and let them know that, I mean, this is unbelievably unique that we are providing this extent of mental health services. Again, not just for our on-campus students, but for our evening and online students as well. I mean, I've had students all over the country, and it's incredible that they have these opportunities. So I'm sure that's something you're extremely happy about this new partnership.
It's a really great network of providers that they have, and they're also partnering with our public safety team for on-call crisis support as needed. So they've been a really great partner to work with.
I'm looking forward to seeing how it has an impact on the students as the time goes on. It'll be interesting to see the transition from the counseling center we had on campus to this new system.
Yeah, it'll definitely be a big transition. I mean, Tom and the team that he had here were so impactful and really built a lot of great student relationships. And so it'll be a transition as students are getting used to this new provider partnership that we have. But I'm hoping that students will really take advantage of this network of support that we are providing.
Absolutely. Let's move over to the shift in advising center. Mm-hmm. So really up until a few years back, I don't want to take a guess on when the year was. We used to have a model of academic advisors from a faculty level, and then we moved to an advising center where we had success coaches who were not only helping students schedule courses, but were also dealing with, other aspects or other avenues that people needed assistance with in their educational experience. Part of this restructure has now moved faculty members now back to advising. talk about that decision in terms of having the faculty members be more involved in the advising of class registration process.
Yeah, so the faculties are really the experts in their programs and have those close relationships with the students in their programs. And so moving to a faculty advising model really allows the faculty to work directly with the students within their programs to make sure that they are progressing through those programs, in the best possible way. So it's building on that faculty-student relationship.
What's really a challenge, so I have always worked with my students in terms of registration. It is a major transition. And I just want to say to any students listening, the one piece of advice that I would really give is if you have not, to this point, either introduced yourself or gotten somehow a hold of your advisor, that now is a really good time to do that. This will come out during week 6, and our online registration ends, I believe, shortly thereafter. Of course, you still can add classes all the way up until the end of the term. But that being said, I think it's worthwhile for you to set up a meeting with your advisor and just to get to know them, because in many cases, a lot of the students who have a new advisor may or may not know that person. And so an introduction is, I think, very helpful. One of the things that I hope that this will help with is really having the students understand the challenges of our schedule. Other schools really only stress 2 advising sessions, right, for the fall and for the spring. We have 4 different terms in a year, which means we have 4 different times to advise students. It's good because I actually get to speak with students and learn more about them and their goals, but it's bad because you really do need to be proactive. I have seen more classes recently fill up quickly than maybe so in the past. So I'm hoping that as this model continues to be, that our students will, and faculty members too, to a certain regard, really become proactive and trying to get everybody registered for classes during open registration. But that's just me.
Yes, we would certainly love for students to register during open registration, which, as you mentioned, does close at the end of week 6. So we've also been encouraging students that if maybe they don't know their academic advisor, a great way to meet them is to stop in during their office hours in the hub, now that all of our faculty are having those.
Which I love, by the way. I just saw you there this morning.
I know. It's a really great gathering place. I love running into everybody there.
I have had an immense success. So let's move on to that. I know that that's not, necessarily something that you're overseeing, but it's something is still all part of this, right? I love the hub, and every week what I've done for my hour is I schedule 2 students each week, and I ask them as part of class to come up and visit with me one time during the term. And then that really, because when I have advising meetings with students, often I'm limited by time, either my time or their time. This gives me an opportunity to really talk with them about what are your goals, what are some things that you would like to do, where are some places maybe you'd like to intern. I know I'll continue to do that moving forward. I want all of my classes to do this because I really, really believe in it. But I hope, and I believe that when Adrian presented that, I want to say over the first, was it 2 weeks, there was over 100 people came. That is really, really cool. And once you develop a culture that is a thing that professors want you to come to, and it's a space where people that you can feel comfortable, that's all we really want. And I hope that that's what the students want. Clearly they've been coming. So that's wonderful. So what are your thoughts about the hub?
Yeah, I'm loving the hub. I think it's a really great place that folks are gathering to meet with their faculty, to get help. I know some faculty are using that time to do study skill review sessions or exam prep with their classes, being able to provide that kind of extra layer of out-of-classroom kind of structured support. I'm seeing a lot of students using that space. So it's been a really exciting kind of new service and space that we're able to offer. We still have our student tutors working out of that space. Very soon we'll have kind of an additional space up in Bollinger. So if there's programming happening in the hub and you're having a hard time kind of hearing and focusing, we'll have a kind of quiet study area that tutors can work with students for when there's a lot happening in the hub as well. But it's been just a really great kind of central gathering place.
I love it. Have you had the chance to go to the hub yet?
Yes, I have. It's very homey, I want to say, and it makes studying a lot easier knowing that there's someone around me.
Let me ask, and from a student's perspective, what are the differences between visiting a professor for office hours in the hub versus visiting a professor for office hours in their office? Because I do believe that there is a stigma to that, maybe. So maybe walk me through a little bit about why you think that it's a bit more comfortable in that space versus just going into someone's office.
I think it has to do with the surroundings. Not that professors don't have nice offices. It's just that it feels like more of a cafe vibe, in all honesty. Like, even though there's no drinks being served, obviously.
Well,
but
let's get a Keurig machine up there. I'm sure we can make that happen.
But it's very casual instead of it feels like you have to be more professional when you're meeting for office hours. But when you're in the hub, it feels a lot more casual because you're surrounded by other people. And like I said, it's almost like a cafe vibe.
I love that. I'm so glad that you brought that up because I think it's safe to say that the average professor doesn't get a whole lot of traffic during their office hours. Not even just here, anywhere, right? And so I love to hear that because like I'm now starting to think, maybe I should just have all my office hours in the hub because it's much more likely that either somebody's going to come in and want to work with me or I can just go help other people who might not necessarily be coming to see me, but just coming to see the space in general. So I love this addition. I'm really, really looking forward to what the future holds with the hub. Well, let's talk about a few other things. We still have a few minutes left. One of the things that you also said is that you're in charge of the multicultural programming here on campus. And obviously, we are in the middle of Black History Month. And so I wondered if you wanted to give maybe a bit of an overview on the types of things that we are going to see. Specifically, there's a couple of things I want to talk about. You have some TED Talk Tuesdays. One of those is going to be the day that this is actually released on February 14th, and the second will be on February 21st. Also have the Black History Month Luncheon on February 23rd, and one of my favorite movies ever, 42, film screening and discussion at 6 o'clock on February 24th in the theater. So let's talk about some of these events.
Yeah, so these are some of the events that we've got happening this month. You'll also see displays up in the ATEC. We'll be having a door decorating contest. But in terms of these events, so since we were just talking about the hub, our TED Talk Tuesdays happen in the hub. So we use that kind of big screen TV in there, pull up a TED Talk that we can watch together and then have a facilitated discussion about it. Our Black History Month Luncheon is always a very popular event on campus that's coming up on the 23rd.
And that's also available to students too, right?
It is, yes. We do ask that folks pre-register. That is free, but it just helps us plan in terms of seating and food at that event. You can expect some student performances. We give out our Black History Month Student Awards. We have a speaker. We've got great food. It's always a really good event.
And please, if you're out there listening, please get your nominations in for these awards. Often that is very much driven by faculty and staff for many of those awards. So please, if you're out there listening, please consider, and it's all in Central Station. I'm looking right here at the February 8th edition of Central Station, more information about how to put in for those awards.
Yes, absolutely. Please nominate students for these awards. And then on the 24th, our Anti-Racism Advisory Council is sponsoring a screening of 42 and will be facilitating a discussion at the end of that movie as well. So we're really excited about that.
For those of you who don't know, 42 is about Jackie Robinson. And as a person who not only loves baseball, played baseball my whole life, I am the play-by-play commentator for the Knights. I am an avid baseball historian. And when I was growing up, learning about what Jackie Robinson went through to be the first African American in Major League Baseball is something that is still so regarded and appreciated today in the game. To the point where every year Jackie Robinson Day celebrates his legacy. And breaking the color barrier in Major League Baseball and effectively starting the movement to break the color barrier in all sports. Mm-hmm. So not only was he carrying the flag in baseball, he was carrying the flag for all American sports. I'm sure he didn't think about it at the time of how important that was, but gosh, this movie, I love it.
It's such a good movie.
It's obviously there's a lot of horrific things that happened to Jackie Robinson in his life, but and I think the movie does a pretty good job of illustrating that. but it also illustrates a lot of the joy that Jackie experienced as well. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, as they say. He dealt with a ton of hardship, but he's a Hall of Famer with a legacy that no one will ever forget, and all the things he did. I'm sorry, like this, it means so much to me as an avid fan of the sport. I love when I saw that you were showing that. I'm absolutely in love with the film, and I hope that anyone who hasn't seen it certainly considers going. Again, that's Friday, February 24th at 6 o'clock. The film screening and discussion on 42 in the Capitol Blue Cross Theater. Sarah, before we get out of here, I wanted to see if you had any questions that you wanted to run by Megan about really any of the things that we talked about today.
So about the first year experience, what do new students have to expect when they come to Central Penn for the first time?
That is a great question. So Elijah is our new director of first year experience and PACT. And so he's going to be working to make sure that students have programming throughout their first year that really welcomes them into the Central Penn community and really provides them with the skills that they need to be successful in their first year, from new student orientation to coordinating with housing to do kind of housing orientation activities to programming throughout that first year for students. So a lot of ways to be welcomed into the community.
I know one of the things that had been done previously was the Claiming the Castle program. Is that something that's still going to continue in a different iteration with the new leadership in the FYE program?
Yeah, I think it might look different. Elijah's in his third day, so he's still acclimating himself with all of the materials and programs that we previously had. But I envision that we will continue to partner with ResLife to really help our residential students transition into housing and into kind of a shared living situation that they might not be used to.
And that's what I found really interesting too. So I remember when I was in school, I had one roommate and we shared a space. What's interesting about Central Penn is even though you do get your own room, it's not just like you have to please one person. Many of the suites, there are 5, 6, 7 people in a suite, and it's all about sort of that dynamic. Even though you have your own room, it's still about living in that shared space together. And that's why I always thought that program, the Claiming the Castle program, was always really interesting, because that's probably one of the toughest challenges about coming to college is living with somebody. I mean, yeah, you may have had brothers and sisters, but it's nothing like meeting a random stranger and now all of a sudden you're sharing space with them. So I always thought that was really cool. Well, I would love to have Elijah on in spring term to learn more about, I want to give him some time to get his bearings, but I'd love to have him on, and I would love to certainly have you back on. It's always a pleasure, Megan. I appreciate your tips on time management, because even I find myself struggling sometimes with it. So I'm going to start trying to do that. I live and die by my Outlook calendar, but that 3 things I need to do today, that can really, really help, because sometimes when you're overwhelmed, and even if you have an unbelievably productive day, but you still didn't get everything done, sometimes you walk away a little disappointed. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'm on my way home like, man, I didn't get this done, I didn't get that done, instead of thinking, well, you got like 15 things done. So
right.
It's
celebrate the wins that you do have.
Exactly.
Yeah, those 3 things, they're life-changing.
I love it. Well, again, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have you, Megan, and I thank you for all of the hard work you do. I'm hoping that when springtime rolls around, you have some more people in place. Things are going to be a little easier for you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy coming on the podcast. So.
My pleasure. And Sarah, thank you so much for everything you do. You're such a wonderful addition, our new vice president for the Nightly News Media Club. And we're looking forward to having you back to do the news. You're going to be doing the news later this term. Yes. So I'm really, really, really looking forward to that as well. So thank you for everything that you do and all of the time that you dedicate toward the club.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to.
It's my pleasure. All right. Well, hey, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. I'd like to thank Megan Peterson and Sarah Whitmire for their time today. And we will see you again next time on the Nightly News Podcast.